Hey, FanboyNation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
You're watching.
We're watching. You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy. Fanboy.
Fanboy.
Fanboy.
A fanboy, etc.
FanboyNation.
Dot. I assume Tom.
Alex Rappoport, we are here talking about your new documentary, or at least your latest documentary that will be part of Slamdance, entitled With Peter Bradley. This is a guy that's been working since the 70s and completely ignored. And then he turns close to 80. He starts pushing 80. He's 79 years old. Then all of a sudden, people are like, oh, yeah, that guy's brilliant. Oh, we should pay attention to him. How did the documentary come about? How did you find out about Peter to begin with? And then how did it all just meld with audiences recognizing him?
Well, let me start first by saying, Peter hadn't had recognition for quite some time, but in fact, in the early 70s, he was recognized and was represented by the preeminent art gallery dealing in abstract expressionism at that time, Andre Emmerich Gallery in New York. He was the first Black artist to be represented by Emmerich, maybe the first Black modern artist to be represented by a major gallery in the world at that time. I can't say that for sure, but if he wasn't the first, he was one of the first. But then, by the late 70s, that type of painting had sort of fallen out of favor. And then, through whatever issues there were facing Peter, I mean, not least among them racism in the fine arts, he lost that place in the market, but he kept working all this time and moved upstate. He and I, the reason the film came about is he and I both live in Saugerties, New York, which is a town of less than 25,000 people in the Hudson Valleys, a couple hours north of New York City. We're among a lot of creatives that sort of sought refuge from high rents, over the years. And I met Peter exactly 3 years ago in 2020 through a local art gallerist that my wife was friends with on the local town arts commission. And when I heard briefly about Peter's story and also saw how dramatically beautiful his art was, the fact that he lived so close to me, I asked for an introduction, and Peter and I got along just, great from the start. In fact, the first time I met him, Peter asked me if I wanted to just go get my camera that day and start filming. But we got started, and it was just a one-on-one experience the whole time, just the two of us. So that intimacy is what I think really comes across in the film. The whole film, he's the only character seen on screen. We never leave the environment of his home, his property, and his studio that he paints in on the property. And it's just Peter telling his life in his own words. When I met him, it seemed that no one had been interested in his art for decades. But as the universe works, while I was editing in the fall of 2020, he sort of got rediscovered and had his first solo show in New York City a year later in October of 21, and is now, he was financially insecure when I met him, and he's not financially insecure anymore. Some of the paintings are selling for six figures. It's really remarkable. And a lot of these are canvases that were literally piled up on his floor with nowhere to go when I met and filmed him. So it's been a dramatic turn of events for Peter. That's tied up with a broader recognition of Black artists now, particularly of his generation, particularly since he's still alive. He's now 82. And so the timing just came back around. He hung in there long enough And thank God he had that work ethic all the time, that when they came around, he had the big stack of paintings ready to go out the door, you know, so more
It,
power to.
for someone like Peter, I don't know him personally. I know you had the intimate interactions with him, and editing sometimes can be creative, sometimes it can be authentic. Is there ever somebody like him where it leads to almost a bitterness? Oh, now you recognize me, so now I'm going to charge you more than the 6 figures. Like I would have charged you $5,000 for this photo, or I'm sorry, for this painting, but now it's 250. So good luck with that $250,000 coughing that up type deal.
You know, it's interesting you raise a point about that bitterness. One thing that really struck me about Peter the whole time is that he didn't harbor any major resentments, I don't think, about the trajectory of things. I think he always felt like if he kept working, he'd get back on top one day. And, you know, he was right. And in terms of, you know, the art market and prices, that really, you know, it's all about the galleries and them figuring out, you know, the value of things. That's one thing I really wanted to steer clear of, by the way. Actually, a number of people have asked me why I haven't included the sort of the happy ending, you know, Peter getting back on top, which I was certainly still, I could have done some extra filming at that point last year. The answer to that is, on one hand, I don't really find success terribly interesting as a subject. And also, the art gallery really didn't want me filming in the gallery of those exhibits. I think they had seen the film. They knew about me filming from the day they showed up. And they saw early rough cuts and they loved it. And basically they were like, don't ruin your film, this great pure portrait of an artist, by bringing, you know, the commerce of art into it with all its vagaries. And, you know, and I agreed, and I was grateful that they had that attitude about it.
What do you learn of yourself from making a documentary like this, where this man for nearly 50 years is forgotten by the art world to all of a sudden reemerge as this breath of fresh air when he was there the whole time, practically hiding in plain sight?
Well, I mean, he's certainly an inspiration in terms of his work ethic, his approach, the whole organic way that he deals with paint and canvas, and in that broader attitude, you know, of, like I said, of just still remaining positive despite having those setbacks for so long. I don't know, you know, the vagaries of the art world, it's the same in anything, you know, in film or music. You know, you're riding high in April, shot down in May. Isn't that the lyric of Frank Sinatra, right? So, you know, you just got to, I think the real takeaway is just plug away, stay true to yourself, and, you know, be pure in whatever you're doing. I mean, what I learned about myself in another way is just the perseverance to spend 3 years on this project that, you know, was just a personal undertaking. I mean, there was nobody else involved in this up until the point I needed a composer to do the soundtrack, and found Javon Jackson. So it's been a lot of work. And, you know, if I ever make a nickel on it, that'll be great. But my main concern the whole time is just to be able to bring Peter's story to the world. So I'm so happy that Slamdance is giving me that opportunity.
Well, you mentioned Mr. Jackson and his quintet. What was it like when you discovered him and his music, and how it played along with the documentary of Peter's life?
Well, that's actually another great story that has this wonderful Peter Bradley's world vibe to it. So Peter has known Javon since he was a young man in the late 80s. Javon, right out of like Berklee College of Music, started playing with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And Peter, as people will know if they watch the film, Peter was a close friend of Art Blakey, Miles Davis, a lot of jazz legends in the mid 20th century, since he was a child, in fact. And at some point, Peter's wife invited me. Javon was playing a concert in Poughkeepsie, which is between us and the city, the summer of 21, I believe. And she said, you should come and see this show. Our friend Javon is playing. And afterwards, she introduced us, and then she said, I've got this idea. Don't you think Javon would do a great job if he did the music for the film? And I said, oh my God, yeah, it's perfect, because the style of the music he plays is of that, it has that sound, that kind of classic jazz combo sound. And I was thrilled. Honestly, I didn't hear the music until I was in the recording studio when they laid down the tracks, and I had my laptop and I was just playing the picture, and we'd talk about the timings and stuff, but he knocked it out of the park, I have to say. It's an incredible soundtrack. I'd love there to be an opportunity to do a soundtrack record, really, but I don't know how that might be able to happen.
Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out. I spent 3 years making this documentary.
Yeah.
But we're talking, this leads us all into Slamdance, as you're part of the competition documentary feature film. You whittled this down after 3 years to 86 minutes. That's a triumph in and of itself. Take us through that editing process first, and then submitting to Slamdance, and also, before we forget, the screening times at Slamdance. Yeah,
certainly. Well, the editing, the fun and games was the filming of it. That was all just sheer pleasure. I, at a certain point, sort of stopped filming to sit and edit for a couple months and see what was there, and made lists of, when I realized also that it was just going to be Peter, that I didn't want anybody else in it, just to kind of keep Peter in his own, like an oral memoir, really. Then I would make lists of where I needed to ask him other things to fill in the gaps or elaborate on stuff so it was more clear. And I'd go back and I'd pick up little interviews with him. And if he was painting, I'd film him painting a little more too. The scene of him drawing in bed, which I love, that was a thing I picked up later at the next fall. And then, I wish I could have afforded to hire an editor. I couldn't, but I really love editing. And I would work on it, and then thank God I have a lot of really smart friends that work in film, that are filmmakers or editors, and I would share it with them and get their feedback. And I would digest that and then go back in and make revisions. And this went on and on and on until just before I arrived at a final cut, which was really not until the end of November of 22, after I'd already submitted it to Slamdance. So it's been a process, but I feel good about it now.
Well, wasn't it Michelangelo that said man is both the marble and the artist?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's psychic. Editing is really, it's a whole other part of the brain. And the other good thing is that I was under no pressure. I mean, I could take my time with it. No one was asking to see it. No one was asking me to make changes for them. So the independence of the process, and in that way, it really, if it fits well with Slamdance, I think, that sort of just get it done kind of punk rock, DIY ethos of it all. And so the screening times, the first screening in Park City will be on Sunday the 22nd at 12:45 p.m. There's a short film. I apologize, I can't recall the name of the film offhand right now. And then the second screening will be on Tuesday the 24th at 5:30 p.m. All at the Treasure Mountain Inn location. And then I highly recommend everybody, for $7.99, you can get a virtual pass to the whole festival. And there's an incredibly cool looking bunch of films that are playing that I can't wait to see in person as much as I can.
The beautiful part about the virtual pass that you just mentioned, and especially being just under $8, is that we also don't have to go freeze in Utah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very nice and comfortable with the heater on in the home. So
Yeah. And look, most people are seeing films on smaller screens now anyway. Um, I'm glad for it. I mean, it gives a larger audience for the festival and for my film in particular. And for those that can come and be there in person, that's going to be a really special event. And I look forward, to getting comments from folks.
Is there
after
going to
they
be a
see it.
Q&A, by the way, after the first screening or the second
Yeah,
screening?
there'll be a live Q&A. But if anyone goes to the website with peterbradley.com, there's a contact page. If they hit that, it's going to come right to me. So if you watch the film and you have questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them by email.
And what was Peter's reaction to seeing the final cut of the documentary and his family?
Peter, God bless him. Peter's just like the biggest fan of mine and the project. I want to tell you, from the very first like 2.5 hour rough cut I showed, which had him saying all kinds of outrageous stuff that I thought was funny, but then I was convinced, oh no, you really shouldn't, try and push that many buttons with people. He thought it was great, and he still does. He hasn't seen this final cut, but he saw one that was very close over the summer. I did a little work in progress screening at the local theater, and he was there. And my friend, an editor, sat next to him, and she said Peter was moved to tears at a couple of points. And so, my relationship with Peter has just been the greatest part of the whole thing. And if the worst I'm accused of is making a fluff piece about Peter Bradley, I can totally live with that. You know what I mean?
Listen, after 50 years, he deserves a fluff piece.
Yeah, I think so too.
With everything that's going on, the documentary is screening at Slamdance the weekend of the 24th. You're being recognized as a filmmaker. Your subject is quite interesting. How does it feel as a filmmaker to get that recognition, for your work and your efforts? Because personally, if the movie's bad, I don't like to talk about it. I don't like to review it. I don't want to talk to anybody involved with it because I don't have the heart to insult somebody's work that they put so much effort into it. Unless, it's a $400 million picture. I'm like, that's what you gave us, really? But, when you get that recognition, when you get that viewing of what came from it, what does that tell you, like, as a filmmaker?
Well, for a filmmaker, I mean, for any artist really, but, for filmmakers in particular, where, it's not like music where you can just jump on a local stage or something and perform for people. It has to be seen. The work has to be seen. And it takes a lot of time and effort and money, in some cases, not in mine. And so that's everything. You just want to have an audience, and I'm thrilled in particular about Slamdance in one way because it's one of the first festivals of it's getting out of the gate early for 2023, and I'm hopeful that I don't know if I'll find a distributor for it. I don't have a sales agent. It's not the kind of film that I think people are going to see big dollar signs with, but I do think it'll find an audience. I hope that this is just the beginning of a great festival run over the course of the year, and that it'll be some steps that lead it ideally to at least a home on a streaming platform where it can be seen globally. And it's everything.
What might actually be great is doing college tours, like going to all the art colleges and go, look, you're not going to hit, most of you aren't going to hit it out of the park, the day that the ink on the diploma clears, but here's somebody that persevered and continued through.
Absolutely. And certainly for art students and art schools, I would really hope it could find, museums. I would hope that maybe it could find its way to be scheduled in the regular program at MoMA, at their theater. But the other thing I've been pleasantly surprised about in the few work in progress screenings is that people that don't know anything about art or connected to it really connect with Peter as just on a personal, charismatic way, but they really see him as this interesting historical, cultural figure, this kind of lost little gem in a way. And and what's great about abstract art is like it's all on the surface, so you don't have to, there's no interpreting to do. You're not looking for the hidden message. It's like, oh, do I think that's pretty, or does it evoke an emotion? And so the way Peter does that with a complete lack of pretension, I should point out, is also very inviting to people that don't know about art, that they can just be drawn into that and dig it for what it is without having to know anything per se.
But it's also the very human condition. You know, Colonel Sanders didn't make it till he was almost 70. You know, Peter's finally getting recognized in his 80s. So there's something to be said about perseverance and working your butt off to get where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I'm just so thrilled that Peter's receiving this recognition. It's very cool that he's getting this now and the film's done, so that there's, you know, maybe he'll even reach a bigger audience with the film now adding a little momentum to that. You know, I think within the art world, a lot of people are finding out who Peter is. You know, he's been written about in the LA Times, New York Times in the last year, but I think it'll be cool if other people just know his name and be like, oh yeah, that cool artist, I want to go check. People that will go check out an exhibit of his, that just because they heard his name or saw the film. You know, I think that would be great.
Before I let you go, Alex, I do have to ask this for my personal experience. When the Blu-ray, DVD, 4K gets released, part of that cutting room floor stuff that was in the original 2.5-hour cut, will that make a bonus feature aspect on the disc? And will Peter also do a special limited edition cover for the home entertainment release?
Oh, that's a really cool idea. I'll have to ask him for that. I hope that we get to a point where there's some bonus feature disc out there. I have a lot of stuff. In particular, you know, I have incredible, cool footage of him painting that I never dreamed would not wind up in the finished film, but I just didn't have room to open it up for that. Mostly because his biography was so dense, you know, and even I pared down the biography, but I realized, you know, his story was really more important than the art at a certain point, which is not what I had thought going in. I thought I'd be making a film about making art, you know, but then the more I talked to Peter, I was like, oh, well, this is a bigger thing. And so the amount of archival research, the time I spent, you know, tracking down photos that could illustrate the story, I mean, that was a whole other thing. Yeah.
Alex Rappoport, thank you so much for your time today. Please remind us of the screening times at Slamdance and where we can find you on social media as well as your website, so we can connect with you and talk to you about With Peter Bradley.
Absolutely. Well, withpeterbradley.com, that's easy to remember. At Slamdance, January 22nd, Sunday at 12:45, and January 24th, Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. And I'm on Facebook. You know, I'm working on a whole social media thing right now. It's in progress. Because I've never, you know, I'm 57. I haven't even been on Instagram or Twitter. So I'm employing some younger cats to get that going for me. So look out for it. It'll be there by the time this is out there. There'll be a social media platform ready to go.